Happy Sunday, beautiful patrons. Today's message is really more of sharing one of my most challenging experiences. Very early on, when I realized that I was going to have to claim bankruptcy, my mission at that time in life of traveling around the country and speaking on behalf of, at one time, recovering from religion, of course, as well as the Clergy Project and telling my own story, that mission was greatly challenged by the bankruptcy because the bankruptcy required that I be able to show a steady income, thus proving or substantiating my pledge to pay off the bankruptcy, to make monthly payments and pay off the bankruptcy. I filed the kind of bankruptcy where you pay everyone back. And so I had to show a job. I had to show steady income. And this caused me to open my consultant business and in particular to go to work for one particular chemical company as one of their several consultants. And this worked well for the bankruptcy, but obviously it added, with everything else that was going on, an extra layer of stress and obligation. And then just within a few months of going to work for this company and putting them in my bankruptcy process, I was offered the book deal, the book deal for Hope After Faith. Already, the short time that I had worked with this chemical company, I had realized that my boss, my immediate supervisor, was extremely possessive. Extremely possessive. One of those people that Paul sometimes accuses me of being of, that if they text you and you don't text them right back, they'll start beating your phone to death, texting, wanting to know where you're at and what's going on. And that was the way that I perceived this boss to be in my life. And I thought at that time that there was absolutely no way whatsoever that I could write the book and then publish the book and market the book and also work for this very possessive person. Now, where I failed at that moment in my life, and of course hindsight is 20/20, is that I failed to follow the principle of it's easy to live life hard, but it's hard to live life easy. By trying to minimize my stress and minimize my responsibilities and obligations, I really put myself in an even greater financial strait as time would go by. Now follow with me, stay with me for a while, that now the book comes out and the book sustains us for a year. The advance that I receive, along with a huge amount of help from my mother and stepdad, we make it through an entire year of staying out on the road and marketing the book and telling our story and of course, fortunately, which has always been the entire point, helped improve and change many people's lives by simply telling this story. And so this brings us to a point to where now the advance money is gone, the year has passed, and I go back to work for this company. And once again, my immediate supervisor is very much in effect in my life. And around the same time that my connection with this company gets re-energized and I am having to learn literally a library of new information about chemistry, about construction, about how this job works in order to be a good consultant for them, I get invited to speak at a TEDx event down in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, this TEDx event, though it's a TEDx and not technically a TED Talk, this event becomes premier for me. This becomes one of my, for me, in my little life, a crowning achievement because the TED Talks had been so instrumental in bringing me knowledge that I would have not had access to most likely in any other way, and breaking me loose piece by piece, piece by piece, piece by piece, over a course of years as I was struggling with doubt and working my way through doctrine. The TED Talks really were a constant river of information and inspiration. And so to have the opportunity to do a TED Talk was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, even though it was a regional TEDx event. But unfortunately, at this exact same moment, I was called by the company to fly out to Los Angeles and to give a presentation to a room full of architects and engineers, and to do this in front of the owner, not just the boss that I was working under for this company, but also the owner of the company. And so all at the same time, I had preparation for the TEDx event, and I had preparation for the Los Angeles consulting job. All of this happening after now a couple of years of being on the road nonstop, being in the battle, completely and totally exhausted. Totally exhausted. And so I did not prepare for the TEDx talk the way that I should have prepared. I did not put the energy into it. I went by the seat of my pants entirely too much. And the venue, though the venue was fantastic, the way that the event itself was lined up was just, none of it was intuitive for me. None of it had the free flowing style opportunities that I was used to. And so all of this is crashing down. I'm driving to New Orleans. I'm already exhausted. I'm timing my flight from New Orleans to Los Angeles. The flight is going to leave out at 4 o'clock in the morning. The TED Talk event is going to end like at 10 o'clock the night before. All of this is wrapped together into one intensely chaotic, nerve-wracking, body energy draining, for me, what felt like a catastrophe. And another place that I really dropped the ball at that moment was that I did not reach out for second opinions. I didn't reach out for a second opinion on the TED Talk because I was so absolutely intimidated by the time limit that during the entire talk I am concentrating with 90% of my energy on the clock, on the timer, and giving far less to my own creativity and to my own self-expression. And so obviously I felt like it was not a very good talk. But at the same time, I had not reached out to anyone else in the company that I was working for to find out whether or not the things that the boss was telling me about the owner was true. And on top of all the other stress, on top of everything else that was going on, what the boss was telling me was that the owner was a nightmare, that he was almost impossible to please, that he was unforgiving, that he would fire you on the spot, that he would correct you in front of an audience. And all of this pressure worked its way together to truly stress me out. And I completely lost focus. I, at that time in my life, was stretched entirely too thin. I was still dealing with the rejection, being rejected by family, being rejected by friends, losing the favor of the community, being rejected as a leader within not just the religious community, but within the political realm. All of this rejection was still very much raw and real in my life, and to be honest with you, still is today to a great extent. At the same time, as I've already mentioned, I had been traveling continuously, constantly on the move, and so I truly was physically and emotionally exhausted. Besides that, I was still working my way through some very important relationships. The closest relationships I have, I was still fighting and digging my way through that, trying to find compromises, trying to find ways to work these relationships out and salvage what was able to be salvaged. And obviously the reason why that I had gone back to the consulting company, or opened back up my consulting company and went back to consulting for the chemical company, is because of finances. If you've ever lived being constantly broke, then you know the pressure. You know how this drains you, how this completely and totally consumes every thought and pushes your mind in a direction regardless of how much you try to do otherwise. It is the ultimate distraction. At the same time, I was still, as I still am today, was trying to find my role in the secular movement, to find my place. Because I'm not a firebrand atheist, I find it difficult to truly get my feet planted in the secular movement and find my real home and my real mission. And so all of this was playing over in my mind and within my body as I was taking that stage at this TEDx event. At the same time, I was still very much responsible for the success or failure of Hope After Faith. Along with that is now this new business, and that tomorrow I will meet the owner of this company. All of this crashing down at one moment. So though I'm not very proud of that particular presentation, though I'm not very proud of that speech, and I doubt I've even shared it more than a couple of times, what saved me, what kept me from totally losing everything, that just falling completely apart and breaking down on that stage under the weight of all of that pressure? And it is simply this. I had already determined, even though I had not prepared the way that I should, I had already determined that when I stepped up on that stage, I would do the same thing that I did the very first time I stepped up on the American Atheist platform the day after the Reason rally. And I would do what I had done very successfully at the end of my ministry. I would step up on that stage and I would enact, I would live out my primary value. I would step up on that stage, and regardless of all the pressure, regardless of the stress, regardless of the obligations, regardless of whether or not this could be a breakout moment or not for me, I would step up on that stage and I would be honest. Because to me, that is one of the greatest values, if not the greatest value, that an individual is able to possess and express. I stepped up on the stage and I was honest, and I was honest about my failures, and I was honest about my fears. I was honest about my shortcomings. I was honest about my lack of knowledge. I was honest about who it is that I am, and I was honest about my story. And our stories, when we're honest about them, they are not only a rehearsal of our past, but they also give direction about our future. We create through our honesty about our own stories, our own mythologies, our own religion, our own stories, our own story books, our own narratives, our own comic strips, our own novels, our own novelization of our lives. I'm reaching for every analogy that I can find to emphasize that not only is there power in telling our stories, but the real power, the foundation from which that power launches, is in honesty. Many times brutal, self-deprecating honesty. True honesty. Not hearing what others want to hear, not tickling the listener's ear, but expressing what it is that we fear. True honesty is liberating. Honesty. When honesty is voiced and it echoes, reverberates, bounces back from the listener's life back into your own hearing, it is enlightenment. And the freedom that is felt when the burdens of duplicity, when the burdens of pretense, when the mask falls, when the costume is shed, the feeling that is suddenly and completely radiating from your inner being, it's as close to nirvana as I've ever been. So, take the good, take the bad, take the ugly, and value the honesty of your experience. Continue to be